I think the key in 2026, the theme will be Australian property will stand out as a high performing growth asset versus other assets in the world. So
Yeah.
I think we'll see maybe a potential correction in the share market, other correction in equities. And I think people will realize how safe housing is in Australia. What are your thoughts,
Yeah.
man?
No, man, it's a lot of info, and I totally agree with that. I guess most of what you're saying. You're right in the sense that I think when you look at property, it seems a bit bizarre. Or how does it continue to keep going up and up and up? And I think the key issue here is sort of the lack of supply and the government, doing some sort of fiscal stimulus quite regularly to try to keep the demand up. So when supply is choked and demand's high, that pushes prices up, and that can be, the case even when fundamentals are pulling in the opposite direction. I think we've seen stress in the market definitely recently. Not a collapse, but a slowdown definitely coming. Business insolvencies, and unemployment, other things like that, were highly correlated to the US market, and I think we're seeing how that's going, and we're seeing some corrections in the equity. So I think Q1, Q2, we're probably going to see a bit of a slowdown. We might still continue to see growth, but it's going to slow down. I think Q3 and maybe even Q4, there might be a bit of pain in the market, but I think overall, if you were to look at it in aggregate over the full year, I still think property is going to continue to perform, reasonably well and still grow. I think you correctly identified there definitely are going to be pockets that correct, but
Yeah.
I think if you normalize that over sort of the short to medium term, they're not going to be too material. And in terms of certain pockets and certain cities, I'm not too close to how much each city will grow, but I agree with you on certain things. Like, for example, I've looked into Melbourne a fair bit myself, and there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between the level of economic activities that are happening in certain cities versus the asset growth and the price of houses. So I think we're going to see some interesting stuff. And yeah, I agree. Risk adjusted, I think Australian property seems to be a very, strong performing asset. People have always said it's a bubble, it's going to crash. And, 30 years later, there's just things that keep it propped up. How
Yeah.
sustainable it is, I don't know. But what I do know, it's kind of realmed into the too big to fail kind of situation where if you allow property to really crash, it's going to have a big domino effect, which is going to
Mhm.
basically tumble our whole economy. So
Yeah.
government typically doesn't like that and doesn't let that happen. And they've got, their magic wand. They can do a couple of things to sort that out.